Most people bring notes. I bring bow and arrow. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I've been really looking forward to this since Mal and Terry had been talking to me about coming. I'm really not more passionate about anything else other than you and your health. I believe God has called me to be a physician, and why did I want to be a physician is really to help people become more healthy. But I think it's important first to understand that God has given us our health, and that without Christ, we're just rearranging chairs on the Titanic. There are three things that God cannot do. Three things. God cannot love you anymore. He couldn't have given you anything more. And he couldn't have made it any easier to receive salvation. And I think that is the most important thing we could talk about. I was hearing the previous speakers, and I'm so happy to hear the salvation message given and opportunities given to you to receive Christ. But I think that is the most important thing I could say about men's health. I'm going to talk a lot about different dimensions of men's health, but there's nothing more important than that. So let's get started. I kind of feel bad that you guys scheduled me right after lunch. Got some gross pictures. You can't ask an ER doctor to come and talk without showing, gross pictures or telling gross stories. So we'll have some fun there. But as a Christian, I love the story of Caleb, and I'd like to share that with us as we get started here. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive. This is Caleb talking, by the way. He's 40 years old when Moses had given him this promise. Now, 45 years later, since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness, here I am today, 85, and I'm still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out and battle now as I was then. I think that's a great picture for the type of a man we want to be. And I love what Chris had said. We need you guys around a long time. And I think we all want to thrive. And I think Caleb is a beautiful picture of that. And ultimately, our body isn't our own. It's a temple. We need to glorify God with our bodies. And I think glorifying God with our bodies means taking good care of it. So I spend most of my time in the emergency room, working like one of my APU alumni calls as a janitor, cleaning up people's messes. People will come in and mess themselves up, usually related to alcohol and car accidents. That's what keeps me in business. But I really spend most of my time fixing bodies. And not just the physical, but also the mental. I think it's terrible what's going on in mental health right now, and I'm so glad David's here to speak. I wish I'm not a gambling man, but I wish I could take one of you with me, or all of you with me. It'd be kind of crowded. And then I would wager that I would see at least 3 patients on a shift of adolescent kids who tried to kill themselves. And it's working in the ER is kind of a sad and terrible place, but it's a wonderful opportunity to share Christ to the lost and to bring healing. So outside of the ER, I work with firefighters quite a bit. Love the fire station. I actually used to be a volunteer firefighter. Before medical school, I actually was pursuing a firefighting career in Orange County and decided to go to medicine. In helicopters as a medic. My wife and I were talking. I actually won the Baja 500, and I never realized it. And I said, "Thank you, honey. I didn't know that." So we were talking a little bit. I used to run a medical support team for the Baja 500, and actually was one of the drivers in our off-road vehicle. And our number was 5150, which is a cycle. But we had so much fun racing. Well, anyway, we broke our drive shaft and we couldn't finish the race. But we were the last ones to go out. Everybody goes off in different divisions. And then my wife said, "Well, who else was in your division?" And I said, "Well, I guess we were the only one in our division." So technically, I guess I won the Baja 500. I also have an opportunity to be a doctor backstage at AT&T Stadium in Dallas. Bands like Metallica and U2, and it's a lot of fun just to be part of that and to be able to, I'm basically running a drunk tank, really, but it's fun to be there and be involved backstage. But my favorite role, though, is working with the Dallas Cowboys, the most expensive sports franchise in the world, and it is really a blessing to be there. I'll tell you a quick story. I wasn't planning on sharing this, but I just feel like I need to say this because it's the providence of God is just absolutely amazing. When I was a boy, my dream with my dad, who's sitting in the back there, was to be the sports medicine doctor for the Seahawks, because I'm actually not a Dallas Cowboy fan as much as I am a Seattle Seahawks fan. So, sorry. But it's really a wonderful story of, I had some difficult things, whether it was one of my mentors in high school telling me you're not smart enough to be a doctor, or various things throughout life. But one of the things I gave up on as time went on was becoming the sports medicine doctor for the Seahawks. You get married, you start having kids. I went to school, medical school, after a 10-year career in education. It just didn't seem realistic to pursue that sort of a dream. And so I followed God. My wife and I prayed about it. We moved forward and where we thought God was leading us, and we went into emergency medicine. And I worked hard. It was really interesting to see God use my career in teaching and firefighting, and as a doctor in the role of a medical director as an ER doctor. So all three of these skills God had blessed me with, and I get to do that every day and get paid to do it, and it is just a blessing. Well, God wasn't done. If I would have known that this sort of a job existed, I would have wanted this, but I didn't even know it existed. I wanted to be the sports medicine doctor for the Seahawks, right? Well, what I came to learn is that most of the time those guys are working for free on the field, and they're trying to generate business for their clinics. Now, that may not be true with all these doctors, but most of them are using it to generate business for their clinics. And this job that I have here, they pay me to stand with the team on the sideline, and I don't do anything. Now, I have a skill in being able to stabilize airways. It's the only people that can do what I do. It's called an airway management physician, an AMP. And an airway management physician is skilled at intubating a patient. And any physicians in the group know what that means. You put a tube down somebody's trachea so they don't hopefully save their life. And my AMP colleagues and I are doing something that's probably one of the most risky things you can do in medicine, is to hold the life of a 20-something-year-old athlete that's making millions of dollars every year. And if you mess up, the financial ramifications are about as big as you can imagine in medicine. So, and you do it in front of millions of people. So but it's a fun role. One of my favorite roles is practicing with the team and preparing for emergencies. And I like to think that's what we're doing here today, is preparing for the inevitable. And when we're working on the practice field, preparing for an emergency with all of the different athletic trainers and physicians involved with the team, we imagine some things happening and we prepare for it. And I love what Rudy Giuliani had said, is the best way to prepare for the unexpected is to over-prepare for the expected. So today, as we talk about men's health, I really hope to equip you, and I really think I can, to help you be more healthy when you walk out of this door today. And I hope that I can inspire you to make some change, not for our glory, but for His glory, to be more healthy. I can't be here without telling stories, so I got a few to tell. First one is a guy, he was working in the factory and he brought his arm in a bag into the ER, literally ripped his arm off. And he came into the ER with his arm in a bag. He saw something getting stuck in one of these high velocity conveyor belts, and he tried to free what was getting stuck, and it ripped his arm right off. It separated the bones up here and ripped the skin down here. And I asked him when he came in, I said, "Sir, are you hurting?" He said, "No, I'm not." I couldn't believe it. I said, "Well, I'm going to give you pain medication for me." And so I loaded him up. This is another story. Not too long ago, actually pretty recent, I had a patient who told me anyway, when he showed me what was under his sleeve. He said, "Well, I had this mole on my arm and it just kept getting bigger and I wasn't sure what to do with it. But then my family said I was stinking too much and they told me to come to the ER. This is a guy's mole on his shoulder, completely ripped away. There's another guy, he thought he had a concrete project in his backyard, so he was kneeling in the wet concrete, and he didn't know that concrete burns your skin. And then he thought he just got really cold, maybe some frostbite. And then a couple days later, his skin turned black and plastic, and he realized, I better go see the ER. This is a guy that was trying to run away from the police, jumped over a wrought iron fence and got stuck on top. And the paramedics cut the fence around his leg and brought him into the ER with a fence in his leg. So I could talk forever about cool stories in the ER. Anyway, I had to show some of those things. I love, part of my favorite part of my job is just the unique stories and, how did that happen, sir? And it's actually a fun part of my job. But here's a great story. And what I'm going to talk about now, this is the number one killer of men. Almost 800,000 people die every year from coronary artery disease. From the cerebrovascular disease, basically the not taking care of our arteries. That's what's killing people. My friend Ken, I work with him. We found him in the janitor closet in the ER. He'd had a massive stroke. The right side of his body was paralyzed, and he couldn't talk. And by the way, the ER is probably the best place to have a stroke. We were able to get him to the cath lab, and he's back at work now. And Ken and I our friendship has just grown, and it's just an amazing story. And this is one of the things I do love about the ER is seeing people's lives saved. Now, most of the stories start with a 911 call, and then you end up with an ambulance at your house. And then they take you to the ER to see me or one of my ER colleagues. And in the ER, you're usually brought to a room like this, a trauma bay if you're really sick. If you're not sick, you're probably waiting in the waiting room for a while. And this is a story of a gentleman who was brought in by ambulance, woke his wife up at 2 a.m. Hey, I've got some chest pain. And the ambulance came, and then he ended up dying in the ER bay. As they pulled to a stop, he went into cardiac arrest, and they started chest compressions, brought him into this room. We got him onto monitors, and we were preparing to put him on a ventilator. But before we got him on the ventilator, I saw on the monitor this weird rhythm. And so I said, we need to shock him. And so we shocked him, and he immediately sat up in bed and said, where am I? And I told him, I said, well, you died, and then we just saved you, and now we're really scared, and he's apologizing to us for scaring him. It was a funny story. I've had a patient recently whose wife made him come in because he'd been coughing for months. And this guy ended up having cancer, and he ended up going to radiation therapy. Another guy had a little blood on the toilet paper, and he ended up in the CAT scanner and had to have his colon removed. Sorry about that picture. This is the Wolverine. He's a Marvel. I think is he Marvel? Marvel, yeah. His superpower is healing, I think. He's also pretty strong. But he in real life, Hugh Jackman actually struggled with skin cancer. And I love this quote that he has, an example of what happens when you don't wear sunscreen. Basal cell, the mildest form of cancer, but serious nonetheless. Please use sunscreen and get regular checkups. I was visiting my dad not too long ago, and I was looking at his ear. I said, he's right back there. He said, Dad, what's on that ear of yours? He thought it was just a little scab that kept coming back. And I recognized it was a basal cell carcinoma. My dad almost had his ear removed. The cancer had gone all the way down to the skull. And if I hadn't noticed it sooner, I'm afraid that it could have gone to brain cancer, and then the outcome wouldn't be so good. But like I said earlier, now the first part of my talk here is about the reality of where we are in America. We are not very healthy. Recently, the life expectancy went down for the first time in decades. We usually live about 78 or so years. And what kills most of us are the top two, cardiovascular disease and cancer. Almost 800,000 cardiovascular deaths every year. And cancer, over 500,000 people every year. So briefly, I'd like to touch on some of the medical risks of all these things. I think it's important to know that because I think my answer to health has to do with a lot of these things, and we're going to get to that next. For your heart and your brain health, the risk factors are high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, smoking, your age. If you're older, you got a greater risk. The pump's a little bit older, The plumbing's a little bit older. And then, of course, family history has something to do with it. But let me tell you something. We used to think that family history and genetics had a lot to do with longevity. About 90% of your longevity is due to your choices and your behavior. Only about 10% of your longevity is related to genes. Don't smoke. That's all I'm going to say. If you're a firefighter, be careful too. Wear your respirator, because there are some other cancers that could be done with chemical exposure. It used to be that at age 50 you got a colonoscopy. They changed that. I don't know if you know that, but you should know that. If you're 45 or older, you should have had a colonoscopy, regardless of your risk factors. If you have a lot of risk factors, then you need it before age 45. And that's a recent change, just several months ago. And then prostate cancer, of course, the most common cancer. But really, it's the BPH that hits most men. 50% of men at age 50 have an enlarged prostate and trouble urinating. And you should see your doctor about getting screened for prostate cancer. Some people don't need to be screened. So it's something, again, talk to your doctor about whether or not you need to be screened. So enough of that. Skin cancer. Wear sunscreen. Minimize your sun exposure. And if you have a weird-looking mole, see your dermatologist. So what we've covered now are the most common killers. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm so glad I'm done with that now. I mean, I like telling the stories. So that was cool. But some of the risk factor stuff is just the reality of where we are in medicine. So now, how do we become more healthy? And I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I have done probably hundreds of hours of research on reading things. And I'll tell you, this is a confusing topic. Even as a physician studying all of the research out there, it's still very confusing. And it's frustrating for all of us to read papers in the New England Journal of Medicine that say eat more fiber, it decreases your risk for colon cancer. And then a year later, another study comes out saying the reverse. It's like, what do we do? Well, that's very frustrating. And I'm hoping to make things a little clearer today as we try to optimize men's health. So your DNA is not your destiny. We invest $3 trillion into the healthcare industry here in this country. If we took the healthcare sector of our economy alone, it would rank 5th on the globe as a country. We spend a lot on men's health, not just men's health, but on health. So men's health is an important issue. And if I were to ask you, I'm not going to pick on anybody. I guess, Chris, I can pick on you maybe. But if I say what would make you more healthy, you might be thinking, and you all might be thinking, well, I probably could eat better. Maybe I should exercise more. But I'm here today to tell you that those aren't the most important things. There are multiple things that are more important than what you eat and what you do as far as exercise. In our culture today, we are caught up on food. It's almost an idol. We try I'm going to be a vegetarian. Well, no, I feel like I can eat eggs and I can drink milk, so I'm going to be an ovo-lacto vegetarian. Now, you know what? To heck with all animal products. I'm not even going to wear leather. I'm going to be a vegan. No, you know what? Bees are okay. I'm going to be a vegan. That's really it exists, a vegan. No, you know what? Jesus ate fish, so I'm going to be a pescatarian. I'm going to eat fish and vegetables. Well, you know what? I kind of miss my top sirloin steak. I'm going to be a flexitarian. I just want to eat as much red meat as I did before. Yeah, you know what? I'm just moving to Australia. I'm going to be a kangatarian. It exists. They eat kangaroo meat plus vegetables. So my point in this slide is it confusing. It's so hard to know. Well, if I can improve my health, what do I do? And I really feel like I have an answer. The great physician upstairs has the answer. But I think there is a lot of data out there, and I've sifted through it, and I really feel like I have some information that really can change your health. And I think one of the best studies done is this guy, Dan Buettner, who went out to these blue zones. How many of you have heard of the blue zones? Anybody? Yeah. So he thought, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go find these places on the planet where we have the most centenarians. The highest percentage of people over 100 years old. And so these are the 5 areas on the globe with the highest percentage of centenarians. I'm not going to take all the time to read, to talk about what he in this book, but this book I highly recommend. It's very interesting, but I think he missed the mark in some ways because he left out what I think is the most important part of men's health. But what he did is he looked at these countries and tried to find, or these areas, and tried to find commonalities between them. And I'm going to highlight these: a plant-based diet, constant moderate physical activity, and social engagement. These were, now, it's more complicated than this. I'm going to get into it a little bit deeper, but these are major components of men's health, I think, that we can kind of apply to our lives. But I still think he's missed the most important component of health, and I'm going to get into that. So I wanted to have fun, and I wanted to make up my own diet or lifestyle. So I called it the phallotarian. Phallo in Greek means, and DTS, right? Where did you go to seminary, Chris? Was it Dallas?
No, not Dallas.
Where'd you go?
It was in Washington State.
Oh, okay.
Christian Life School of Theology, APU.
Oh, awesome. Well, my pastor, he went to DTS out in Dallas, and phallo in Greek means thrive, and that's what we all want. So I didn't really I don't really call myself a phallotarian, but I thought for this talk it would be fun to make one up. Everybody else is making up names, why can't I? So a phallotarian, it would be somebody who wants to thrive. And I think we all do, like Caleb in the verse I mentioned in the book of Joshua. And this is the answer. I really think that this rest, just to stop and to rest, I think that is a component of men's health that is absolutely ignored, and you won't find many books on it. You won't hear a lot of talks on it. But I think that rest is more important than diet. Diet's important, and I think it's more important than exercise. And then I also think community and being known by someone is more important than diet and exercise. But I would put rest as more important than even community and being known. So let's start this. I broke the word rest into an acronym so you can remember it easier. And obviously R stands for rest, and then exercise, then sustenance, and then team. And I think rest, again, is the first one listed. It's the acronym. It's the most important one. And I think, this is interesting. I was talking to my uncle, who's a physician in San Francisco, and he showed me something I didn't know, which really surprised me. And I thought, wow, it really is the most important thing. Did you know you can live longer without food than sleep? The human body, if you really could stop sleep and not sleep, you would die between 10 and 13 days later. Your body needs sleep more than food. And the advanced interrogation techniques our military uses also back this up. The most effective form of torture that we know of, sleep deprivation. And if you read through these recently released documents about some of the tactics that use to deprive people of sleep for torture, it's pretty awful. So I'm not just talking about sleep here, though. I'm also talking about rest. So rest isn't just put your head on a pillow. Rest also has a whole lot to do with just releasing the worries of the day and taking conscious time during the day to rest. And in our society, I think this is a very hard thing to do. Maybe even harder than going plant-based. We get bored so fast. Spending time in prayer, spending time away from our phones, getting our kids away from their electronic devices is a very difficult thing to do. And in Scripture, Christ knew how important this was. It's the fourth commandment. He doesn't talk about, legalism and eating. He doesn't talk about exercising. Thou shalt join CrossFit. It doesn't say, well, you should be part of a church and be part of a community and have lots of friends. No. God knows our body. This is interesting. I hope I'm not getting too far off topic here. I forgot my phone actually back there. If I'm going too far, let me know. But I think this is important. God told Abraham thousands of years ago, don't cut the penises of those boys until they're 8 days old. And Abraham obeyed. If you were a good, if you followed God and worshiped like he said, you wait 8 days before you circumcise those boys. What's really interesting is that we know now there's this thing called the hemophilia of a newborn. It takes 8 days for the intestine to mature enough to be able to absorb vitamin K to build the cofactors to stop you from bleeding to death. Well, God knew that, and he told Abraham what to do. God tells us what to do. Fourth commandment. And I think that the Sabbath, which is what the fourth commandment's all about, is taking time to transition from human doings to human beings and to rest. This is a book I read, and I highly recommend it. It's all about the Sabbath, 24/6, and it's not good just because it was written by an ER doctor, but it is a beautiful book, and it's not about taking the Sabbath on Sunday. It's about taking a Sabbath. In our family, we take Sabbath every day. Not the whole day, but every day at dinner time, there are no electronic devices, no phones, no TV, nothing. Just dinner and fellowship and prayer, and it's my favorite part of the day when I can be home for dinner. And then every week we take one day. So every day we take an hour. Every week we take a day. We take Sunday, sundown Saturday night to sundown Sunday night. Sundown Saturday night to sundown Sunday night. And every year we take 1 week and we go to a family camp. And this has been something that's been such a blessing to my family. And there are so many benefits to taking health. I love one thing that Charles Spurgeon, he used the bow. That's why I brought this today. I wasn't hunting. But the bow is always under tension, right? And I really believe that we in this room are always under tension. I was talking to a family counselor just a moment ago here in the audience. The number one thing he sees in his clinic is anxiety and depression. I really believe that God is calling us to rest. This bow is under tension, and when I want to shoot the bow, of course, it's more tension. And I don't know if you're living here, or if it's about to break. I don't know how you feel right now. You might be feeling at that breaking point right now. But even right now, this bow is under tension, and I would encourage you to take this off. Complete rest. This bow is not going to work in these pieces. And that's what rest is all about, is taking that bow off. No tension at all in these parts. There's enough time during the week for stress and for busyness and for anxiety. And I think it's really important for us as men is to take time and to be the leaders in our homes about putting rest into our daily pattern, weekly pattern, yearly pattern. I work with some of the most expensive athletes in the world, and these guys are studs. But exercise, I don't think is the most important thing, but certainly worth talking about. And it's not that you do a certain type of exercise, it's that you choose to do it. I think that's important. And I think the benefits for exercise are obvious. And it can be a lot of fun, and it can be social. A friend of mine does CrossFit, and he's a specimen. He is ripped, and I look at him and I get a little jealous. I look at Ezekiel Elliott standing on the sidelines. I think, wow, that guy's a beast. I wish I was like that. And the reality is that not all of us can do that kind of a thing. I would encourage you, like me, I found some things I enjoyed. Whether it was mountain biking or lifting some light weights in the garage or hiking or taking a walk. I like to garden. I've got a green thumb from my mom. These are activities that I enjoy. I don't enjoy going to the gym and sitting on a treadmill. I tried that. It didn't work real well. And I'm finding now that I'm enjoying this. Now for me, one of my biggest problems was food. I am a food addict. I'm a workaholic too, but we're not talking about those things right now, but is food, okay? I do think food is important, and I'm telling you now, based on my research, these keto diets, the paleo diets, the Whole30 diet, the Atkins diet, are not the most healthy diets. The plant-based diet is the most healthy diet. And I could talk about all the studies done. I mean, the Adventist Health Study that was done studied 360,000 people. I mean, these are big studies. And these doctors that are implementing the plant-based diet aren't even publishing stuff anymore because it's so profound in getting people off their medications. Are you a diabetic? Do you have high blood pressure? A plant-based diet, I mean, it used to be a big deal when people would start the plant-based diet and not be a diabetic anymore or not to have high blood pressure anymore, no high cholesterol anymore, sleep well, It used to be, now it's so common because the plant-based diet is becoming more prominent. They're not talking about it as much anymore. This didn't come through very clear, but I'll tell you what it says. The American Heart Association now recognizes the plant-based diet as reducing heart disease by 42% on people without heart disease. But I don't want the focus to be on weight loss. I love what Joel Furman says, is focus on health. And some people might think that a plant-based diet is extreme. And it really sounds extreme if you think about it. No meat, no oil, no dairy products, no cheese, no sugar, like refined sugars and stuff, no processed foods. Like, what do I eat now, right? Well, that's part of the reason why our country is so sick. And if you want to be more healthy, I'm telling you the best way to go is a plant-based diet. It's not the most important thing you do, but if you really want to do the most healthy thing, the paleo is not the answer. I lived for a decade in Loma Linda with plant-based folks. And I found a lot of wonderful, actually I want to go back. I love this quote. 500,000 people a year will have their chests cracked or opened up and a vein taken from their leg and then put into their coronary artery system. Now I call that extreme. So here's his book. Esselstyn wrote a great book on preventing heart disease, and not just preventing it, but reversing it. My dad asked me to mow the lawn when I was a boy. And I went and grabbed our lawnmower. It looked a lot like this. And I mistook the paint thinner can for the gas can. And I destroyed the lawnmower. Imagine now that this $16.4 million 1957 Ferrari Testarossa was your body. What kind of fuel would you put in it if you bought, this was sold in auction for $16.4 million. I saw some nice cars. I saw a red Tesla out here. I mean, if you have a really nice car like that, are you going to think about what kind of fuel you put in? Like, you think you'll check the oil, maybe change the oil filter, check the brakes? You're going to park it outside on a rainy day? In Texas, we've got hail the size of oranges. I mean, I don't have a car like this, but if we did, if you thought about your body like this car, you're going to be thinking about what you're putting into it, right? So I think a plant-based diet, if you want to know what the best fuel is for your body, and there are tons of these NFL athletes that are going plant-based that look like the Hulk. I mean, it is a misconception to think that you're not getting protein if you're not eating meat. It's really silly. One thing I'd like to say about the plant-based diet that I think is important, and I could talk for this, we could have a week-long session on the plant-based diet, is that the inside lining of your arteries has endothelial cells, and they secrete nitric acid. It's like a Teflon coating of your arteries. And when you eat processed foods and plant and protein from animals, it creates this inflammatory situation that hurts these little endothelial cells, and they don't make that Teflon coating. And that's what we're finding now is the genesis of these plaques in our arteries that causes all these deaths. And the good news for you, now it wasn't too long ago, I almost weighed 300 pounds. And I started doing some of these things, and the plant-based diet is one of the things I did. When I went to Panera today with my dad, I ordered this quinoa bowl. It wasn't too long ago that I wouldn't have been able to stomach that. I wanted to have a steak sandwich. And to be honest with you, I still crave those things. But when I eat like this, I feel like I'm investing in my body. I feel like I'm regenerating those endothelial cells I've been kicking in the shorts all my life for 45 years. Real quick, I love ice cream. My wife and I have found a plant-based recipe for ice cream. Frozen cherries, cocoa powder, and almond butter, and a frozen banana, and dates. And I'll tell you, it tastes just like chocolate ice cream. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. So that was an easy thing to replace. I don't drink milk anymore. I drink almond milk. We make these plant-based meatballs and put them on our spaghetti that we learned. We got the recipe at Loma Linda. And I'll tell you what, they're selling Loma Linda foods now at Costco. You can buy these packets, and they're delicious. So it is extreme to do these sorts of things, but I can tell you the investment is profound. The last part, rest, the T is for team and community. And I think being part of a team and friendship and being known by other people is a part of health that's really important. Did you know that isolation and loneliness is more harmful to your health than smoking a pack a day? Did you know that loneliness and isolation are more harmful than obesity? So you see that guy at the restaurant who's eating a lot of food and he's obese, and you're thinking to yourself, well, that guy's lazy. He needs to stop eating Twinkies. I don't know what you thought, but that's not necessarily the case. It's not as unhealthy as being isolated. I made up my own quote here, and I really like it. I'll share it with you. You can pretend that you like it. We trade authentic friendship in for bricks of self-sufficiency and build walls of loneliness and isolation. And this is a huge part of men's health. I am a co-founder of a group, AC SOMSA, which is an acronym for as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And I really believe that as men, we can join together in community, in authentic friendship, and we can find tremendous healing and health. And I could talk about AC SOMSA another week after we do the plant-based diet. But that's not the most important thing. It's rest. I really believe that rest is the most important thing, and I think we can all do that. It's an easy thing to change. I'm not asking everybody to do it exactly the way I do it, but I think taking an hour every day, and a day every week, and a week every year is a good place to start. At least decrease the amount of time you spend on those devices. You know, there's a verse 12 after what I read you at the beginning. I'd like to share that with you. And I'll highlight what we read before, but God gives you your health. And Caleb recognized it. His health was from God, and he was strong, and he was vigorous. But I think that last verse, I wanted to add it. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. He had purpose at age 85. He had purpose. He wanted to go to battle. He had purpose, and he was driven to it. And I think we can all have purpose. But if it's not all about Christ, then it's really a waste of time. I really believe that if you're not pursuing Christ, all of this health message really is all for naught. It's been a pleasure meeting you guys today. Thank you.